Have you ever tried explaining, like, how the U.S. government works to a child, or honestly, even just to a friend over coffee?
Oh, it is a complete nightmare. You think it's going to be easy, and then
Like,
suddenly,
you start out with the best intentions. You think it's just a simple, straightforward conversation. But within, I don't know, about 3 minutes, you are totally tangled up in committees and subcommittees and partisan gridlock.
and veto overrides, and the different
Yeah,
chambers.
exactly. Suddenly you sound like you're reciting from this dense, dry textbook, and you can just literally see their eyes glazing over.
It is an incredibly intimidating system, to be honest. And I mean, part of the problem is that the resources we typically use to explain it are just as convoluted as the process itself.
Oh, absolutely.
You're usually looking at these, giant walls of academic text or impenetrable legal jargon, or you get those massive flowcharts that look way more like a wiring diagram for a supercomputer than a human institution.
Yeah, we really have this tendency to drain all the life out of it. Like,
Yeah.
all the passion and the human element just gets sucked out of civic education.
Which is such a shame because the stakes are incredibly high.
They really are.
Yeah.
But today, we're actually tackling this massive topic through a completely different medium.
A very unexpected one.
Right. Our mission in this deep dive is to unpack the surprisingly intricate and honestly often frustrating journey of how a bill actually becomes a law.
Hmm.
And our roadmap for this isn't some 500-page legal manuscript. It's a coloring book.
Which I have to admit, when you first brought it up, I was pretty skeptical.
I knew you would be.
But having gone through it, it is an absolutely brilliant approach.
I totally knew you'd come around.
Yeah.
So the book is called Bill to Law, Coloring the Constitution in Motion, and it's created by Dr. Antonio Arnold.
Yes.
And what we have here are pages and illustrations from this interactive coloring book.
Yeah.
He combines these rich, symbolic illustrations with real historical context to make the actual grounded mechanics of our government accessible to absolutely everyone.
And, understanding a bit about Dr. Arnold really contextualizes why this visual approach lands so effectively.
Right, because he has a really unique background.
He does. He is a proud military veteran. There's actually a wonderful illustration early on of him in his uniform, wearing his airborne beret.
Oh, yeah, I love that illustration.
But he's also a Christian author and a deeply creative educator. He spent years in service, whether that's in the military, his church community, or directly in classrooms.
Wow, so he's really been in the trenches of teaching.
Exactly. And that combination of strict discipline and community service really informs how he breaks down these super complex systems.
You can definitely feel that educator's instinct on every single page. I mean,
Yeah.
he isn't just trying to make you memorize facts for a pop quiz. His stated goal is to help kids and families learn about faith and history and civic duty so they can actually become thoughtful leaders themselves.
Right. He approaches the whole concept of learning about our republic as something that should be, well, colorful and full of meaning, not just a chore you have to get through.
Yeah, and he anchors this vast, intimidating bureaucratic process in something highly immediate. Like, before a piece of legislation ever reaches the grand marble chambers of the Capitol building.
Before the politicians even get involved.
Exactly. It has to start as something incredibly small. A simple idea.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the book starts right there at what it calls the idea spark. And I always kind of assumed that laws were just spontaneously generated in the basement of the Pentagon or like cooked up in some think tank.
A lot of people think that.
But according to the source, an idea for a new law can literally come from a citizen or a specific advocacy group, a local lawmaker, or even a recommendation from the president down to Congress.
And the visual representation here is what really makes it click. There is this fantastic illustration depicting public opinion.
Oh, where everyone has their hands up.
Yes. You have citizens actively giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down, standing right next to a lawmaker who is holding a clipboard with the proposed bill.
It's super direct.
It is. It's a very literal, grounded depiction of citizens speaking directly to the people who represent them. It completely strips away that huge distance between Washington and your local neighborhood.
It really does make it feel tangible. And honestly, I was struck by how relatable the process of drafting a bill actually is when you boil it down.
How so?
Well, at its core, drafting a bill is really no different than pitching a family vacation or like trying to negotiate a new household rule. And Dr. Arnold completely nails this with an illustration he calls the family committee.
Oh, that might be my favorite page in the early sections.
It is so good. You have this drawing of kids and parents, and they're all sitting around a kitchen table. They have a piece of paper labeled Bill right in the center of the table.
With all the thought bubbles.
Yes. There are these thought bubbles floating above everyone's heads, and they are actively brainstorming rules about safety, fairness, community standards.
Mm.
And my absolute favorite detail there is a thought bubble with a giant ice cream cone in it.
That's classic.
Right. Someone at that table is aggressively pitching a household law about ice cream rights.
Which is the perfect entry point. But what's fascinating here is why this specific framing matters so much for the reader.
Right, it's not just a cute drawing.
No, starting a deep dive into the legislative process with a family committee isn't just a relatable aesthetic choice. It actually reveals a fundamental truth about how democracy is supposed to function.
Okay, wait, how so? Because my kitchen table definitely does not feel like the Senate floor.
Well, it demystifies the very concept of civic engagement. We have this ingrained habit of treating civic engagement as an elite specialized activity, like it's strictly reserved for politicians in tailored suits.
Yeah, completely.
But fundamentally, civic engagement is just community problem solving. And that begins right at the kitchen table, when a family negotiates a rule about fairness or safety.
Well, ice cream allocations.
Or ice cream allocations, exactly. They are practicing the exact same foundational skills that lawmakers use on Capitol Hill. They're identifying a specific need, they're proposing a tangible solution, and debating its merits with the people it affects.
Wow, that is a profoundly grounding way to look at it. You draft your family bill at home. So, okay, let's say you have your idea. Let's stick with the ice cream rule.
Sounds good.
Your idea spark is glowing. But now we have to move from the cozy, relatively reasonable kitchen table to the actual legislative floor. How does that little idea actually survive the gauntlet of Congress?
This is where the labyrinth really begins, and the book breaks this down into very distinct mechanical steps, starting with the physical drafting. A legislator actually writes the bill. We see a lawmaker at their desk, pen to paper. Then they formally introduce it in either the House of Representatives or the Senate.
Yeah, the introduction part looks very official in the book. We see this illustration of a lawmaker standing at a podium in front of their peers. There's a giant flag draped in the background, and they're presenting the scroll.
But the hurdles start literally the second they step off that podium.
Seriously. The Speaker of the House, or the Senate equivalent, takes that newly born bill and immediately assigns it to a committee.
And that committee review phase is where the real mechanics of government happen. It is not just a polite reading group.
Definitely not.
The illustration shows a small, focused group sitting around a table, leaning in, intensely dissecting the document. We really need to understand that committees are where the vast majority of bills actually die. This is the first great filter.
Wait, really? So a handful of people in a committee can just permanently bury an idea before the rest of the country or even the rest of Congress hears about it?
Absolutely. If the committee chair doesn't like the bill, they might just never bring it up for discussion. It's called pigeonholing.
Just ignore it until it goes away.
Exactly. But if they do discuss it, they rip it apart, they debate the micro details, they hold hearings, invite experts, they strike out whole paragraphs, they add new ones.
Sounds brutal.
It is a messy, combative process. And if the bill miraculously manages to survive that intense small group scrutiny and gets voted out of committee, it is then filed and placed on the legislative calendar.
Which, I learned, is an entire process in itself. There's an illustration of a woman physically placing the bill into a filing box with a calendar hanging on the wall. But just being on the calendars doesn't mean it actually gets voted on, right?
Not at all. There are gatekeepers, like the House Rules Committee or the Senate Majority Leader. They dictate the flow of traffic.
So they can just stall it.
Yeah, if they don't want your bill to see the light of day, it just sits on that calendar forever.
Wow. But let's say your bill is favored. The gatekeepers push it ahead. Now we enter a phase that I think often confuses people. The readings.
Yes, the readings, first reading, second reading, third reading.
The book illustrates these phases happening before the entire House or the entire Senate. A lawmaker stands at the podium reading the text while the rest of the chamber listens, debates, and raises their hands. But I have to admit, I got a little lost in the weeds here.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Why do they need to read it 3 times? Are they just forgetful? Like, what is actually happening differently in each of these steps?
It sounds incredibly redundant to a modern ear, I know. But each reading serves a fundamentally different mechanical purpose. The first reading is essentially just getting the bill on the official record.
Oh,
It's a formal introduction to the whole chamber. Like, here is the title, here's what it's about.
so just a formal hello.
Exactly. The second reading is where the chaos happens.
Ah, okay.
This is the debate phase. The bill is opened up to the entire floor for discussion and, crucially, for amendments. This is where a representative from one state might try to tack on a completely unrelated provision to secure funding for their district,
Right.
or an opponent might try to add a poison pill amendment, which is designed to make the bill so unpopular that it just fails. It is a grueling, unpredictable process of horse trading and arguing.
So the second reading is basically the battlefield.
Precisely. And if the bill survives that battlefield, and the chamber agrees on all the changes, it moves to the third reading. By this point, debate is usually cut off. The bill is in its final, clean form, and this is where the actual formal vote takes place to pass it out of the chamber.
Honestly, walking through this, it sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It's not easy.
I look at this sequence, the committee review, the filing, the gatekeepers, the first reading, the battlefield of the second reading, the final clean vote, and then I realize that after all of that, it has to happen all over again in the other chamber.
Yep. Every single step.
It just seems so incredibly tedious. Why are there so many roadblocks? It almost feels like the entire system is actively designed to make things fail.
And that impulse you have to just throw your hands up in frustration, that is actually a feature of the system, not a bug.
Wait, you're saying they wanted to be a nightmare to pass a law?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of what the founders were trying to achieve, yes, they were terrified of the tyranny of the majority, and they were terrified of rash, emotional, overnight decision-making.
That makes sense.
By forcing a piece of legislation to go through overlapping committees, partisan gatekeepers, and multiple formal readings in two entirely different chambers, you are forcing the government to slow down. You are mathematically forcing compromise.
So it's intentional friction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If a bill can easily sprint through the process without hitting any roadblocks, it probably hasn't been examined closely enough. The labyrinth is intentionally built to ensure that by the time a bill survives, it has been tested, attacked, and refined from every possible angle.
Okay, that actually completely reframes how I view gridlock. But here's the wild part. Even when a bill survives both the House and the Senate, it's rarely the exact same document, right?
Almost never.
Because the House might have passed the original ice cream on Friday's version, but during the Senate's second reading, they amended it to the only after broccoli version.
Which is a crucial distinction.
Right, so now you have two different bills. And the book shows us the solution to this. The conference committee.
Which is one of the most high-stakes meetings in Washington. You have lawmakers from both chambers sitting across from each other, tasked with reconciling those differences into a single, unified document.
It's almost like you have two different architects who were told to design the same house. One built a Victorian mansion, the other built a modern glass box. And now you're forcing them into a locked room and saying, okay, combine these blueprints into one functional house before the concrete sets, or nobody gets a house at all.
That is a fantastic analogy, and you can imagine the tension in that room. But when they finally do hammer out a compromise, it leads to the triumphant moment where the newly amended bill is sent back and approved by both the House and the Senate.
Yes.
The book shows this great illustration of the room applauding. The Speaker of the House and the Vice President sign the bill, making it officially passed by the legislative branch.
It feels like the finish line, like the marathon is finally over.
But it's really not.
And not even close. Because now the bill leaves the Capitol building and travels down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. It is time to face the final boss, the President of the United States.
And the president's pen wields an enormous amount of power in this narrative. The book lays out the executive options very clearly.
Yeah, it does.
The president sits at their desk. There's a great illustration of the Oval Office, the presidential seal on the window, the flag draped heavily behind the desk, and they have a monumental choice to make.
Right. First option, the happy path.
Okay.
They can sign it into law to do. And I absolutely love how the author illustrated this. Throughout the book, the bill is depicted as this little anthropomorphic character.
This is very charming.
It's a rolled-up scroll with big cartoon eyes, arms, and little legs. And when the president signs it, the bill character is literally jumping for joy. It has its fists in the air, confetti is falling everywhere, and the word law is stamped proudly right across its chest.
It's a very visceral, effective visual for success. But, as we know, there is the second option. The president can choose to veto the bill.
And The veto illustration is legitimately heartbreaking. Our little Bill character is slumped over, looking utterly defeated. It's actually crying a single tear.
Oh, I know.
And right next to its feet is a snapped pen with ink spilling out everywhere and a heavy stamp that just says veto. It perfectly captures the devastation of a piece of legislation dying at the very last possible step after months or years of work.
It's a brutal reality check. Now, a veto isn't always an absolute death sentence. The legislative branch has a mechanism to fight back. To override a veto, the bill must be sent back to Congress and pass both houses again.
But there's a massive catch, right? It's not just a simple majority anymore.
Exactly. To override the president, it has to pass with a two-thirds majority in both chambers. And we have to think about the political reality of what that requires. You are asking a significant portion of the president's own political party to publicly defy them on a major piece of legislation.
That's a huge ask.
It requires a massive bipartisan coalition, which is why, historically, it is exceptionally rare and difficult to achieve.
So usually a veto is the end of the road. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. There's a third option for the president, a sort of secret backdoor built into the Constitution. The book highlights this fascinating quirk called the 10-day rule.
Ah, yes, the pocket veto and its opposite.
This blew my mind. If the president receives the bill and just holds it for 10 days, excluding Sundays, importantly without signing it and without officially vetoing it.
It automatically becomes law.
Yes. We see the Happy Bill character again, celebrating under a banner that says 10 days later.
It's a brilliant piece of constitutional mechanics that solves a very specific political problem. A failure to sign indicates that the president fundamentally disapproves of part of the bill, but for whatever reason, they aren't going to stand in the way of its passage.
I am obsessed with this rule. It is the ultimate passive-aggressive political move.
It really is.
It's like leaving a new roommate agreement on someone's bed. If they don't explicitly come out and say no to your face within 10 days, it is a yes by default.
Yeah.
You don't get to just ignore the homework and stop the household from functioning.
That's a highly accurate way to frame it. It allows the president to play a very calculated political card. They can signal to their voting base, look, I didn't sign this, I don't fully agree with the compromises Congress made, without triggering the massive constitutional crisis of a veto that Congress might spend months trying to override.
It's a pressure release valve.
Exactly. It keeps the wheels of government turning even when the branches are fundamentally gridlocked.
It's incredibly clever. But, as you look through these pages and you absorb all these mechanical steps, the grueling committees, the strategic 10-day rules, the vetoes, you realize that the cold mechanics are really just one layer of the story Dr. Arnold is telling.
We talk about all this friction and gridlock, and it is so easy to get cynical about the whole system. But what's fascinating here is how the book anchors these dry mechanics in the actual human beings who design the friction in the first place and the symbols that guide them.
I'm so glad you brought that up because there is an entire section dedicated to the symbolism of the American flag. And I'll be honest, when I first turned to that page, it felt a little bit like a detour.
I could see that.
I thought, okay, we are talking about laws. Why are we suddenly doing a vexillology lesson?
Yeah.
But then I realized he's actually setting the behavioral expectations for the lawmakers themselves.
Precisely. The illustrations of the flag aren't just decorative, they are deeply instructional.
Right. He breaks down the physical elements first. You have the 13 horizontal stripes, 7 red, 6 white, representing the original 13 colonies that push back against Great Britain. You have the 50 white stars on the blue field for the 50 states.
But then he goes beyond the geography.
He does. He points out that symbolically, stars represent the heavens and the aspiration toward a divine goal. It's a constant visual reminder to the people in those chambers that the nation is supposed to be striving for something higher than just petty partisan wins.
And the colors themselves carry immense weight in this context. Red stands for valor and bravery. White represents purity and innocence. And blue stands for vigilance, perseverance, and justice.
Which ties right back into the process.
Exactly. When you think about the legislative labyrinth we just walked through, you cannot survive the second reading on the House floor without vigilance and perseverance. You cannot negotiate a conference committee without a certain type of bravery. The flag is a living symbol of the values required to make the mechanics work.
Which brings us perfectly to the historical figures featured in the book. He highlights 3 foundational lawmakers who really embody this struggle.
Yes, the historical context is so important.
First is James Madison, known as the father of the Constitution. He essentially architected the very friction we've been talking about, helped draft the Bill of Rights, and actually served in the House.
Then you have Daniel Webster. He was a legendary orator and senator who vehemently defended the Union. He really represents the unyielding, fierce debate on the Senate floor. He's the guy drawing the intellectual line in the sand.
And finally, Henry Clay. He's referred to historically as the Great Compromiser. He served as Speaker of the House and brokered some of the most major, precarious legislative compromises in the 1800s to keep the country together.
A vital figure.
And looking at Clay really made me pause. How does looking at a historical figure celebrated specifically as the Great Compromiser change how we view the legislative process today? Because, let's be honest, compromise feels like a dirty word in modern politics. If a politician compromises today, they are instantly accused of selling out on social media.
This raises an incredibly important question, and it gets to the very heart of what this deep dive reveals. By putting Henry Clay right next to the mechanics of the conference committee, it reminds us that compromise is not a weakness. Historically, it is the absolute norm.
Right.
The entire system relies on different, fundamentally opposed perspectives being forced to come together.
Because without Clay's compromises, the system literally fractures.
Exactly. When you have a Daniel Webster delivering powerful, unyielding speeches and refusing to budge, you absolutely need a Henry Clay to broker the messy deal behind the scenes.
That makes total sense.
The intentional friction we talked about earlier. Compromise is the oil that keeps that friction from sparking a fire and burning the whole building down. It isn't a failure of morals. It is built directly into the fabric of the republic.
It is all completely connected. The family at the kitchen table negotiating ice cream rules so everyone's happy, the committee debating the fine print of a bill, Henry Clay brokering a deal to save the Union in the 1800s. It's the exact same unbroken thread of civic duty.
It really is.
And I love that Dr. Arnold doesn't just end the book with the president's signature and a history lesson. He turns the focus right back to you, the reader.
The reflection questions at the end are a wonderful pedagogical move. They force you to move from passive learning to active participation.
I really do. The book leaves you with a few interactive prompts to chew on. It asks, what does freedom mean to you? What does it mean to be a patriot? And how can you actually get involved to make a difference in your community?
And there's that great blank page.
Yes. There is even a blank page at the very end where it encourages you to literally write your own law idea.
After showing you the vast, intimidating labyrinth of the federal government, it grounds you right back in the reality that none of this machinery moves an inch without that initial idea spark from a citizen.
The legislative process is not a spectator sport. It relies on public opinion. It relies on you.
It demands your participation.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. Earlier, we talked about that quirky 10-day rule, the constitutional mechanism where a massive piece of legislation can officially pass the executive branch and become the binding law of the land simply through the president's silence, through their calculated inaction over 10 days.
The default, yes.
Right. Wait, actually, that reframes how I look at a lot of things. If we take that concept out of the Oval Office and put it into your own life, think about your own civic reality.
That's a really interesting parallel.
Whether that's in your local community, in your workplace, or even sitting at your own kitchen table with your family committee, how much of the culture you live in every single day is shaped not by the bold, deliberate actions you take, but by the things you silently allow to pass by default?
Wow, that is a profound question. Silence is its own kind of legislation.
It really is. So something to mull over until next time. Keep those idea sparks glowing.